Welcome to Explore This, the podcast where we take a peek into the hearts and minds of explorers everywhere and learn what it takes to dedicate your life towards creating a better planet. In our first season, we focus on African explorers and feature scientists, historians, ecologists, journalists, and other experts from across the continent. I am your host, Cornelia Sokelo.
And I'm your co-host, Gautam Shah. Today, our guest is Cléa Rekou, a French-Algerian visual storyteller whose life has taken her from the outskirts of Paris to Bangkok's tech world, and finally to Algiers, where she now builds powerful photographic narratives about identity, memory, and people whose stories are often overlooked. Cléa didn't grow up imagining she'd be an artist. She studied finance, worked in tech, and only picked up a camera in 2016. But once she did, she has never put it down.
Since then, she has been creating work that is bold, emotional, and deeply rooted in her own journey of understanding where she comes from. She's photographed the quiet ache of domestic violence, the complexity of family healing, and the layered, sometimes painful, sometimes beautiful, construction of Algerian identity. She's exhibited around the world, contributes to major publications, and is now a National Geographic explorer. Welcome, Cléa. It's a pleasure to have you here.
The pleasure is mine.
Cléa, you were born in Paris to an Algerian father and a French mother. How much Algerian influence do you remember growing up?
Oh, good question. So, something important to know is that my dad is Algerian, but he was born during the French colonization and in a household where education, like everything, is like his mother tongue is Kabyle, which is an Amazigh language, but the second language at home was French. And then he moved to France very early in his life. So really at home and even culturally for him, it's very close. Like there's a lot of French elements in the way like he was raised, even in the way I was raised as such. So being with my mom, who's also French, in a French environment, at home we will speak only French, and we will celebrate Christmas more than any other Algerian celebration or Muslim celebrations. So it was really like a French way of being raised, even though in subtle things, I recognize and I've always recognized myself in being Algerian.
Yeah.
And I remember as well that very early or since the beginning, since the first time I could even have a proper thinking, I remember my dad making me so proud of being Algerian. That is something that even if you don't have let's say the household cultural elements, it's like, yeah, but you're Algerian. Oh yes, but this is a feature from Algerian people. Yeah, like Algerian people, and making myself very, very proud of being Algerian since ever, basically.
I love that. I like that. So as a child, did you make any trips to Algeria?
So I was born in 88, December 88. We did travel there every year until I was 3, so until 91. So, and to the usual things, to visit the family until 91 when my grandfather passed away. But then we totally stopped. Why? Because it was right in the middle of the civil war. So it was too dangerous to travel to Algeria. So that's something that I suffered from a little bit because I felt very unrooted in a way from this connection with my country. And I remember very difficult things that my dad would say when I would be like, hey, can we travel there? Can we go there? I would like to go. And he would say yeah, but in Algeria, they kill little French girls.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And so it also created this weird feeling of being so proud of being Algerian, but at the same time being am I just Algerian? Am I that very proud Algerian girl, or am I actually a French girl? And a lot of questioning in my mind at the time already.
It's very interesting that you say that because I was going to ask you if you ever felt a conflict, and now you bring this up, and I think this is a perfect segue. Did you ever feel as if any conflict between these two identities? Am I French? Am I Algerian? Which am I?
Yeah, a lot actually. It's weird because in my mind it has always been very clear, and I love to tell people that I'm not 50-50. I'm 100% Algerian, 100% French. But I grew up in a place where we will be so many people from families coming from North Africa and all. I will be people will assume I am French and just French. And as a kid, I remember weirdly being suffering. I wanted to shout out loud, like, "Yeah, I'm Algerian." Almost like looking for discrimination, I want to be discriminated. It's very weird. It's very weird, I'm like, why don't you call me hey, why don't you insult me and say, hey, you, like the Arabic girl or something, or like something mean, like it's never me that we identify as being from North Africa, more specifically from Algeria. And then life continued, and I was not even trying to travel to Algeria. I left the country, and when when you go and live in a different place in a different country, you're being identified and then I was always identified being oh, she's from France, she's French. And I was fine with that until I was not fine anymore, and I was like, that's it was like a need, an impulse of reconnecting with I think the kid that I was at first, and who was so proud of being Algerian.
The kid who always visited Algeria.
And Cléa, we're gonna get to this move of yours in a second, but I do want to ask a question about that and this pride of being Algerian. Did that come entirely from the expressions from your father, or were there other aspects of your life, your friends, the place that you grew up, anything else that really rooted you with that feeling of pride and excitement for being Algerian?
I think most of it comes from my dad and the way I was raised, and almost like the tale I was told about my country and how amazing. And yeah, I was like, yeah, we're badass people, like some sort of thing. And so more than really as a kid, because I remember, for instance, even though I was within a community where we were many people from North Africa, I would not necessarily hang out so much with North African people or Algerian people. So it was not something that I could have get from being surrounded by people who are from the same background, but really it was because also I was all the kind of girl, and I think many girls will look up a lot at our dads, and he was a big inspiration in how he looks at the world and the way he built his thinking. And I was like, I want to be that kind of person. And a lot of that was being so interested into Algeria, I think.
Nice. I want to go back a bit to talk about this move, living abroad, that Gautam said we'll come back to. When I read your story, you seem to have reinvented yourself quite a number of times. This first reinvention, when you moved, where did you go to and why?
My first move?
Yes, your first move.
My first move, I moved to China first. So when I studied finance in business school, and I picked that specific school because they had a campus in China. And so because I wanted to leave the country, live abroad, and I was fascinated by Chinese culture. So I started to learn Chinese then for a year, and then the next year I moved to China to study. And I was really fascinated by Asian culture in general and the Chinese language in particular. And then it's actually after I finished my studies, after I graduated and had few of those interludes here and there, then I figured I'll move to Thailand. Oh yeah, maybe it's something I should say. So after China, I randomly got a 1-year internship in Thailand. I didn't choose to go to Thailand. I was like, okay, let's see. I had no, because my thing was at the time was I love China. I want to be in China, but then I couldn't get internship that was interesting enough for like that I could find interesting enough. And so I got that internship in Thailand, and I was like, okay, let's see. No expectations, almost like a negative expectation, you know. And then I loved it so much that more than loving, I felt at the time that I was at the right place. And so after through those different interludes back in Europe or something, I started to suffer. I don't know, it's like being displaced, misplaced. I don't know how we can phrase that, but knowing I was not finding happiness in doing or being where I was. And when I took a moment to think, when was the last time I found myself happy? It was actually in Thailand. So I did everything I could to move back to Thailand, which I did. And in total, I spent 7 years in Thailand.
So 7 years in Thailand, and
Yeah.
and all this time you're still working in finance.
Oh, no.
So these are like three reinventions in the first reinvention.
Yeah. So basically, after graduating, I graduated in corporate finance. And then after graduating, I worked a little bit in France and Portugal in finance. But then when I moved to Thailand for the second time, that's where I started my work in the tech as a product manager.
Another reinvention or another milestone. So now, what inspired the change from tech to photography?
I think I remember the day I told myself, this is what I want to do. And it was in Thailand, indeed. So in Thailand, I started to, at the time, it was a lot of entertainment here and there, but not so many cultural things that I could join or be all that would be aware is happening, and especially in English. And so there was this small event that was hosted in a bar where a photographer will come and show his work. And when I watched his presentation and the kind of work he was doing, I was like, this is what I want to do. This is exactly what I want to do. Tell stories. I don't think at the time I was thinking tell stories, but it was more like a feeling, like a resonance. And now I know that it was like that. I wanted to be able to tell stories and advocate for certain things. So that was at this specific moment that I put all my effort. I would say more like to exist as a photographer, visual storyteller. And I started also to find myself. And I'm sure I did. I know I did many mistakes. I think the photographer I started to be at the time and the photographer I am today are very, very different. And in a way, I'm happy I evolved.
Different how?
So with a lot of, I think, practice like extractivism and questions about ethic and moral that I don't abide by anymore. Like now it's like definitely the kind of way of approaching a story that I will not do, that I'm trying to advocate against even now today. So I remember also the moment where I decided to change as like I realized I was not aligned, I think, with my values deep inside. And I wanted to do something different in my approach as a photographer. And it was because I was photographing a woman who was crying. And I was like, that's not normal. And I stopped photographing and I hugged her because I felt like that's not, like we should be human first. Physically.
Yes, I understand. I think it's interesting that you talk about the ethics of photography. I don't know if you know about this very famous photographer who even won an award for photographing this child in Ethiopia. Was it Ethiopia or Sudan? I think it was Ethiopia. during the famine, and the child was being stalked by a vulture, and there's a whole ethical debate about it. About at what point do you just watch a child almost dying to get the shot? So it's interesting to meet somebody who having such let's call them ethical dilemmas. And just a little bit more on your photography, just a little bit more. I read somewhere that you are self-taught. You self-taught photography. What was that process like?
I think tough. I mean, for the technical part, is difficult a little bit. Not so much to find the resource, because we're lucky. We live in an era where you go online and you can find like resources to learn a skill quite easily. And photography specifically, like you go on YouTube, you're gonna find all the theory, you're gonna find all those resources. But then I think it's the difficult part is like it's not in like the technicality, even though there's a difficult element in it. It's some rules. You learn how to use the camera, and then you get I remember like someone will tell me, oh, if you're not a photographer if you don't use manual mode.
Yes.
Those kind of things.
Yeah.
and then so I think the difficult part, the challenging part, let's say, is more like how can you absorb that so that you put that in your toolbox and you can really make decision to use a technical element, not to use, and make conscious decision, or like also let yourself just go by your intuition and navigate with all that so that you can express yourself the way you want to express yourself. And not be just about technicality. And to be honest, like I'm a very bad technical photographer. I keep telling people, don't ask me to take wedding photos, or like don't put don't put your wedding, the memory of your wedding on my shoulders. It's not like you can get much better than me in terms of like finding someone. So I'm not the technical person, and I'm not like I don't necessarily want to be, but I've done always my best to not make technicality or like what I should be knowing a limit.
Yeah. I have to admit this is a very selfish question because I am also a self-taught photographer. I'm not yet at the point of having exhibitions, so I thought you would give me a secret to how to become very good.
Cléa, at what point did you so you're self-taught, you're really discovering yourself in photography. At what point did you, I don't know if this was the order of events, but at what point did you decide to quit your tech job and focus full time on photography and storytelling? Was it something that happened like all of a sudden, or did you take your time?
I took my time, and it was a debate within myself, because there's always this question of making a living. I think, I mean, in my mind, I had two questions that were running. One was like, am I a photographer if I don't do just photography? Am I really a photographer? And then the second is like, okay, I don't want to be broke.
Yeah, fair enough.
So how can I manage that? Like how can I? Because the reality is that being a photographer or an artist in general, I mean, it's very precarious, and very little people can really make a decent living just out of photography, and more specifically out of your own projects. And so it took me a while, but also I made peace with a lot of like preconception I had, or like also imposter syndrome that I had typically. And then, for instance, today I keep telling people around me, like, you have a camera, you're taking photos, you're a photographer. That's it. We should demystify this a little bit. But then I navigated between, like, I started projects while I was still working, and I had to jungle with those two. And I was always like, okay, at least my work is getting me the independence of doing the projects I want to do the way I want to do them. And I'm not running after typically wedding photography or commercial but I can really just focus on the projects I want to do. But at the same time, then I was like, okay, but I'm super tired because I'm doing literally 2 jobs. Like just what happened is that COVID happened, and then I had to move back to France. I took that opportunity to finalize, like checking the boxes of what society expects from you while I was in France, so that I gotta get jobs in the tech. I made some money enough so that I can like buy an apartment or certain things that you need to be. Basically, don't be a photo, like you can't be a photographer and have access to that easily. So I took advantage of being on the right track according to society, so that I can fulfill those elements. And then once that was done, I was like, now this is the time. And I want to tell stories about Algeria, because I started to travel back to Algeria in 2018. End of 2018 is when I got my Algerian passport, and I joined and I photographed the protest in Algeria that was happening at the time. And so that made me realize that I want to tell stories in Algeria. So after that, I took 2 years, something like that, in France, just to do my things that I expected. And then I stopped and I moved to Algeria to be like, I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to like be 100% just on my projects and work very hard so that I can also grow as a visual storyteller and tell the stories I want to tell.
Amazing, Cléa. We're going to get to that transition to Algeria in a second, but just one more follow-up, just because you mentioned society and progress from society's definition. So kind of on that theme, what were your friends and family saying as you went through this process, or even as you started to think about the decision to move to Algeria?
So moving to Algeria was, most of my family and friends, they knew that I was sort of adventurous, let's say. So the moving is not so much that worried them, but it's more like the photography part. Because they worry about you being able to make a proper living. For them, I think it's a step back in a way, because I was successful in my tech job. And so I think it's they were like, okay, Algeria is not too far. Also, it's very close compared to Thailand. It's very close to everyone. So, and I'm Algerian, so that was like sort of making sense. But it's more like the photography part that was like, are you sure what you're doing? And especially from my dad more than my mom. And I think that as it has changed now very recently, where I can see that he really considers it as its work, or both of my parents are seeing it that this is actual work. Well, I think before it was more like a hobby, and I remember something funny. So my dad would tell me, "Look, why are you putting this hustle on you now? Wait until you retire, and then you can do photography."
But Cléa, it's amazing that you say that, because so I moved around a lot. So we have a little bit of a similar background in that we both came from the tech sector and then transitioned and are now National Geographic. Like there's not that many people that kind of fall into that category. But I moved around during my tech career. I went to India, I was in Argentina, I was in the UK, I came to Kenya. That was never really questioned by my parents or my relatives. But that moment where I decided to quit and get into wildlife conservation, now everything exploded. And then my uncle, who was quite successful in India, he sat me down, and I won't go through the whole story, but he sat me down and he looked at me and he said, "You are living a life of madness. You can do your philanthropies later." And he actually asked me, like, "Will Accenture take you back?" That was the company that I worked for. And so, it's a very, very similar story. Like, when you retire, then you can do your wildlife conservation little things. But in the meantime, like earn living like the rest of us.
It's very interesting hearing like people from that generation who treat passion projects as, this is a pet project. This can't be a career. This can't be something you're doing for fun. Like, this is your retirement plan. do something serious. Be a doctor. Very, very funny.
Exactly.
You've got these two projects, Monsieur and On the Edge, which are very much about domestic violence. Why did you choose to tackle this topic?
Yeah, so those two projects, I did them in France. And so the starting point is, I think it was around 2018, something like that, where on French TV, they started to talk a lot about victims of domestic violence and trying to raise awareness more about just like that situation, like the number of women being victims, but also like what we call the feminicides and the number of women being killed. And they were talking a lot about it, but then I noticed that they were never talking about the perpetrators. And I like to believe that whatever we do in life, it doesn't come from nowhere, and it's important to understand, and it's part of the solution. And so I was like, okay, first I was curious. What if you're a perpetrator and you are, and you want to improve yourself, get better, or like does anything exist? I couldn't find anything. Then what about those that are sentenced? So if they go to jail, whatever the sentence is, like they will get back to society, and then what happens? And I couldn't find really rehabilitation centers. I could find things elsewhere in other countries, like in Sweden, but nothing in France, except by digging, I found this place that was working with the judicial system and with the prison, so that they created an alternative to jail as like acting as a rehabilitation center. And I really wanted to be able to understand how you get to this point of violence. And so that was first that was my interest. That was like, I want to be able, first, I don't want that to be a taboo. And if we talk about the victims, which is really important, it's also very important that we understand where the violence is coming from, why this is coming, and because it's part of the issue, but also the solution. And so by doing so, I also realized that the spectrum of domestic violence is extremely wide and much wider than what we had on TV showing and what was in the news. Typically, the feminicides were really much highlighted, and they should be. But then you tend to think, as a viewer or like someone who received that information, if you don't research, you tend to think that then this is domestic violence. But then when you see what people are being sentenced for and the spectrum of it, it makes it much closer to yourself. And I realized that myself, I've been on the edge of, like typically we consider that if you take a pile of plates, you take them and you throw them, something we've all seen on a TV show, right? And you throw them on the floor out of rage. This is domestic violence. If you punch the wall, it is domestic violence. If you slap, that is domestic violence. Or if you push, it is domestic violence. And so I thought it was important also through the project, because that's something I discovered. Not only to talk about the perpetrators and where the violence is coming from, but also show the spectrum and say that this is way more, they are not monsters. They might have monstrous acts at times, but then they are way closer to what we are all capable of if we don't tackle our relationship to violence. And so I think, especially for Monsieur, because this is the project where I met a lot of perpetrators of domestic violence, I think this is where I actually raise probably more questions about society and our relationship to violence than actually saying, oh, yeah, here's the solution for rehabilitation. Look. But then it opened up on the second project which was something we don't really know, is that in the center was 25% of the couples were actually going back together after the sentence. So after, and the feedback from the educators, the social educators, this is absolutely not something rare or something that should be discouraged. It's just that it's a fact. And then what happens, when you get back together? And so for that, I wanted to be able to talk about it, of the aftermath, basically, of like what is happening after when you go back. And I bonded with a family. The father was actually a perpetrator, and they decided to get back together. And I spent time over 5 years with them, visiting, and their story and the project itself is something. I'm like a female wolf, because it's so precious and so intimate, and my relationship to them is so authentic. And I think it's also it's real people's lives, so we should be very careful. They trusted me, and so that's a project, for instance, that you won't see on my website. That's a project that I've shown only to a few occasions, because that was the right outlet to show it, because I could be there and talk about it and advocate. And so made me also realize of like the responsibility we have as storytellers, and that we should try our best not to break people more than they are.
That's a really powerful project. I think it's a worthwhile cause, and it's very interesting taking looking at the perspective of the perpetrator. As we wrap up, looking back, so you've studied finance, you've worked in tech, you've become a photographer telling very powerful stories. You've moved from France to China to Thailand, now to Algeria. Do you feel like you are where you are meant to be, or do you think there's going to be another transition?
You never know. That's what like people hear when I'm like, hey, I moved to Algeria. They're like, oh, so especially here in Algeria, they're like, oh, so you moved for good, like you like it and you moved for good. I'm like, you never know what the future is made of. So yes, I do feel that I'm at the right place, but I felt like that every time. So I feel like it makes a lot of sense of me being here. But again, you never know. And but that would be like, it would be weird for me to go, I don't know, to Argentina and start to do photography and tell stories in Argentina. So yeah, I'm at the right place right now for sure.
Great. Speaking about being in Algeria, let me just ask a little bit about the project that you're currently working on there. I think it's called Beyond the Step.
Yeah.
So it contrasts what you've done with the other two projects, in the sense that here you're exploring the impacts of desertification on farming communities. What drew you to this project? I mean, it's very much different from the other two projects.
Yes, it's very different. So I think after the two projects, what I knew is I was like, I need to take a break emotionally from people, just because it drains. I mean, it takes you with you, sometimes certain situations. Also, the kind of photographer I want to be, and I try to be, is that if people give me 100%, I give them 100%. And so I was like, I'm going to take a break and do something that is less about people and some of the strong stories they have. And I happened to be traveling to those regions where you can really see in front of your eyes desertification. And when you start to talk with people, and also with in the news, we started to be talking about the relaunch of a national project that is supposed to slow down, or let's say more balance the effect of desertification, and more like sand encroachment towards the north. So I got really interested in the topic and I started to dig. It's always like that. there's something that gets my attention and I start to dig and research. And that's how I come to desertification. But for me, it's impossible to do a project without this relationship to people. And this bond to people and taking really the time. And it's really part of, I think, the way I like my projects to be, or I don't know, it's part of the way I am. And so, yes, the stories were still very tough because we're talking about people who are struggling every day, but probably slightly less intense in terms of like as a witness, like what you will see in front of you. But it was really much people related as well.
When you're not in the field working or taking your photos, what do you do for fun?
It's a good question. I ask myself that as well. Isn't it too much? Because
Sounds like a very fun person.
what do I do for fun? So I like to spend time with my friends and people. I love reading. That's something I do. But see, I feel like everything in a way is related eventually
To your work.
to my work, because when I read something, I get an inspiration. When I'm with my friends, then I'm like, oh, really? I didn't know that. And then I start to think of like, but yeah, so I'm definitely not like a party girl typically. So I don't party that much, but I like to have dinners with my friends or do those kind of things. And my dad visits, so I love to spend some time with him. And traveling, I love to travel again. But when I travel, it's like I'm being fed with, so
You're constantly finding projects. Maybe when you hang out with your friends, you should have a rule where you only talk nothing serious. Maybe you just play board games or play cards, or you just listen to music in silence. So here in this podcast, we like ending it by having our guest give a toast. So think about a toast, and then I will cue you by saying "Here's to," and then you give us the toast.
Okay.
Brilliant. So Claire, here's to?
Here's to this new generation, young people, because I think I have a lot of hope hold within you, because I think they're able to raise the right questions, tackle a world that is not easy. And recently I've realized that they are great and very brave. And so big toast to them.
Oh, as a Kenyan, I would give this toast 100%, especially seeing what happened in Kenya last year with the Gen Z protests that has sparked Gen Z protests across the world. So I'm like, yes, I'll toast to that for sure.
Sadly, with my age, Cléa, I feel like that's you. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, like, Cléa is the young generation that's brave and taking chances. I mean, like, that's totally you. But
so she's basically toasting to herself.
Yeah, well, it's all relative to your to the number of years you've spent on this earth. Which
we can say always to the newest generation, but generation. We're not so. We don't have a big age difference.
Ooh. Anyhow. Don't make us take out our passports.
Anyhow.
So thank you very much, Cléa, for spending time with us and sharing some of your stories. It has been a real pleasure.
Thanks to you, really. It was lovely, and I really enjoyed the time.
Thank you, Cléa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Explore This. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep exploring.